Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Bob Goff. Now, Bob Goff is the New York Times bestselling author of Love Does, as well as an attorney who founded Restore International, a nonprofit human rights organization operating in Uganda, India, and Somalia. Bob is a sought-after speaker for leadership, church, and university events, inspiring current and future influencers to get the do part of his life, or to get the do part of life. And his book, Love Does, has now been translated into 10 languages and was an international sensation. Incredible book. So I'm just so excited to have Bob on. Bob, welcome.
Hey, thanks a million. I'm glad to be talking to you today. Tell me how I can be helpful. What are you thinking about these days?
So I want you to kind of take us back to why you decided to write the book Love Does. What was the purpose behind that book, and what made you say, hey, this is something that I want to do?
Actually, what we had decided to do quite a few years before is make a small shift for me from practicing law to doing justice, right? And there's a big difference. If you want to make a bunch of money, practice law. If you want to make a bunch of difference, do justice. And then more and more, my day job as a lawyer started getting kind of absorbed by this other stuff. But how do you pay for it? And I didn't want to ask anybody for any money because I'm not very good at that. So I thought, I'll write a book. So yeah, as Thomas Nelson said, that if I'd give them a manuscript, they'd give me a school. So that's it. So I told them, one school, one manuscript. And they said, well, tell me about the school. And I said, all right, 500 child soldiers in northern Uganda and 50 teachers. And they said, big school. I said, big book. So I made them pay me in advance. I didn't know if it'd be any good. So we built the whole school, and then they sold like 1 million of these things. So it's been really fun. It's better than a cupcake sale. So we finished the school in Uganda. The second one was in Somalia. We built the third school in Iraq. The fourth school was in Nepal. And we built an orphanage there. We have safe houses in Somalia, 2 in Uganda. The school is going in Mongolia. The next one's in Nicaragua. And we were in Congo a couple weeks ago to scout the next one. So that's what we do. My worst subject in school was school. But it turns out I'm pretty good at starting them. So this whole idea of writing a book, I mean, like, wow, you could actually make a little bit of difference for somebody. So I think all the people that are listening to you that have this beautiful idea, I'm like, get it out there and go do some awesome stuff. Trade people for a school, trade them for a box of Pop-Tarts. Doesn't matter. Just like get your ideas out there.
And what made you say, like, my avenue to get these ideas out is a book? Because there's obviously, I mean, you do a lot of speaking, like there's a lot of other ways to do this, like especially connecting the dots between book equals the way I am going to give my message, and then book also equals school.
You know what I did is I really wrote the book for my great grandkids. And we have 3 children, but we've got no grandkids. I'm barren. So if my kids don't hurry up, I'm not going to get a chance to meet my great grandkids. I wanted to know what I was thinking about. Let me ask you this, Chandler. Do you know much about your great grandfather?
No, not much.
I don't even know his name. I think he was a sheriff, and that's about it. Maybe he lived in Montana. I don't know. Maybe he was an inmate. But one of the things that I don't want to happen is to be invisible. But they don't need to like put my face on the edge of a cliff. I mean, the bases are loaded up there. But what I want to do is leave some evidence behind about what I thought, not a bunch of opinions. I want people to meet love, not a bunch of opinions. That's the problem we have. So what I thought, what if I make a book? I'll put a bunch of balloons on the cover, and I'll just tell the simplest stories about love I can think of. Kind of, I'm not trying to say it the way a lawyer would say it. I try to think, how would Mater on Cars say it, right? Less lawyers, more Maters, right? So that's it. So what would be the simplest way to something? It isn't being false and folksy, and I don't feel like I have a deep South accent, but it could be, what would be a simpler way to describe that? I know the complicated way, and we don't have to prove everything. A lot of times people like want to prove everything. If faith's a big deal for them, they put a Bible verse after it. If something else is a big deal, they put some proof. And I'm a guy that writes trial briefs. I mean, this is a $500 million of winning arguments, but I'm not trying to win arguments anymore. I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to be humble. I'm trying to be available. And the people that are doing what you're inspiring them to do, it's an act of availability. They're letting people know this is what I really think about things. So I would say, speak in your actual voice, sound like you, because we've all read books that sound different than the person that wrote them, because they were trying to sound either folksier or smarter or something, but just make it sound like you. And don't worry about spelling. Actually, we were talking a moment ago about make this your goal. Put one typo in your book on purpose. It's like when I bought a car once. I was so worried of scratching it. Literally dented the fender first day, like just on purpose. The ball peen hammer, one dent. We just got that right out of the way. And so get your typo out there. So when somebody says they saw your typo, you go like, I know.
That's awesome. It's so you're saying like embrace the mistakes because they're going to happen anyway.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, we get so wrapped around the axle about so many things. Who's going to be the president and this, that. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'm not saying being apathetic. I'm saying instead you're so trigger locked on things that actually matter, things that last in your lives and other people's, that you aren't focused on whether it's going to work or not. And that was probably a subtle twist for me. I spent my whole life trying to do things that worked, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. But now what I'm trying to do is do things that last, and loving people always lasts. It's crazy. It'll last for you. It doesn't always work with the person you might fall in love with, but it'll last for you if you're really good at it, because if it's actual love, it'll involve sacrifice and commitment. That's it. If it isn't, all your listeners that are just dating people right now, I'm just saying, like, to the ladies, when some guy asks you out on a date, just ask him what his definition of love is. And if he doesn't know, say, go home and figure it out and then come back and ask me out on a date. I'll let you know if I'll go. Because if he doesn't say it means sacrifice and commitment, it ain't love. It's just dinner and a movie. So that's it. Why don't you write your book? Make it all about love. Didn't even need to be about the title. It could be a romance novel, or it could be like some Jedi, whatever it is. But if the basis of this thing is about loving well, I promise you it will last. Whether you're broke or work or not, who knows? But it'll last in your life, and it'll last in your kid's life, and it'll last. And it becomes the great grandfather they never met. They go like, oh my gosh, that's a message that'll last. This is who we are, and this is what we want. And what we want is love people. Whether faith is a big deal for you like it is for me, your choice on that thing. And I'm not going to tell you what you ought to do with your finances. I'm not going to tell you who you ought to date, but I'll tell you this. Like, this is what I'm learning about love. And I don't have it mastered, but I'm actually trying to turn into love. Isn't that crazy? Somebody, you should update your resume. Like, what's your career objective? I want to become love. You'll lose a couple jobs that way, but you'll know who you are and what you want, and it'll come out in your writing. It'll come out in the way that you interact with people. You just approach people differently. Like, I don't shake hands with people. I just hug. However, there's all these terrific people here at the office. I don't hug them. They're the only ones I don't hug, because it'd be creepy. I'm around all the time, and I want to be like, honor them and let the men know that they're men of valor, and the women that are here, let them know they're women of virtue. And so what I do is I just give them a blessing. I just put my hand on their head, and I don't even know what that does, but it's like duck, duck, goose around here. But they just like honor them. Just say, like, I see you, we're here. And just that moment, maybe that intentionality that you bring to your writing, you could bring to other parts of your life. And then you'll think of things to write. You go like, oh, what if we honored people? And then what doesn't honor people to see who they were, but to see who they're becoming? And then write that down. Here, check this out. So somebody's calling from Pennsylvania right now because I put my cell phone number on the last page of 1,000,000 books. Here, check it out. Hello, it's Bob here. Hello. Okay. Hey, listen, I'm just talking to a couple of friends right now, so I can't talk, but if you call back in an hour, I'll pick it up. Deal? Okay, I'll see ya. So go do that. Be available to everybody. Don't send anybody to voicemail. There's something beautiful about like the people who have loved people the best throughout history. Jesus, Gandhi, he didn't have a cell phone, but they were available to everybody always. So that's my rule. I'm like, just be available to everybody always. And what if you like love people that way too? It'll come out in your writing. It'll change your life.
I love how you said focusing on the message and on that it's something that can at a minimum be passed down, and it's something that you really believe in, because I feel like a lot of times people get so caught up in like, is this going to work? Is this writing perfect? Are people going to like this? And they can lose track of the actual message that's in the book. So that's great. I do want to touch on, I've got so many follow-up questions on this, but I do want to touch on the phone number in the back of the book, because some people are like, Bob, you sold millions of copies of this book and you have your phone number in the back and it's your actual phone number. Like, what's up with that?
Isn't that great? I get 100 calls a day. I can't get a thing done. I love it. Something so validating about calling someone and having them answer. It's like it just said, I see you. I don't have caller ID. I wouldn't know who they are anyway. But there's something beautiful about just saying, hi, it's Bob here. And you know what's crazy? When I answer the phone, I answer every single question they have about me and about you and about every one of your listeners. People just want to know it's true. And there's a lot of people that are saying flowery things. Just show me one simple thing that's true. And saying hi, it's actually, you go like, oh my gosh, the number was true. It wasn't a gimmick about how to buy a box of books or make a pizza or something. It's just like, and that idea of living lives of being constantly interrupted. I want to be that guy. Jesus walked by a guy in a sycamore tree and he said, lunch on you. And he just didn't make it a big religious thing. He just said, like, let's hang out. So you and I practically can't hang out with everybody always, but we can hang out with a lot of people a lot of the time. And we can still get our stuff done. Yeah. And so that's where the rub is for a lot of us. How do you find balance in your life? And what I came up with is, having tried to find balance for years and years, I realized I spend so much time trying to find balance, I tipped over. I just couldn't even walk a straight line anymore because I made all these appointments and this and that. And I stopped making appointments 3 years ago. I don't make any appointments. Literally, I just say, when somebody calls and says, can we meet next Thursday at 2? I'm like, heck no. But we're like talking right now. So, and if you want to hang out next Thursday at 2, just call me. I'd be lying if I said I had an appointment. So what if we just do literally during the time that you and I have already spoken, 2 people have poked their head in the door that just came by. I'm sure there are people that said, can we talk? I'm like, oh, sure. They're like, when? I'm like, I don't know, whenever you arrive. And people will know if you have 2 minutes or 2 hours. And you'll know, is this somebody who's wondering what they're going to be when they grow up? Or somebody just had a loss of a loved one? I mean, all of a sudden you've got 2 hours. But if it's just like, what's your favorite flavor ice cream, then that's more like 2 minutes. So I don't know. I'm just not trying to be stingy with my love, and I know you aren't either, but I'm trying to be extravagant, because extravagant love lasts.
Love it. Now you talked, no pun intended. Now you talked about finding your voice, and really finding your voice with your writing, and writing what's true to you, and how you did that with Love Does. How did you do that? Because I feel like a lot of people that's always the question, like, how do I find my voice without just writing a bunch? How did you do that? And especially take us kind of through like your writing process for writing that book.
What if you find somebody better than you? If you play ping pong or tennis or whatever it is, if you play with somebody who's lousy, when you hit it to them, they'll hit it back and they'll pop it up. It'll go way up high and it'll come down. And then when you hit it, that pop up, you'll pop it up back to them. It's hard when somebody sends you a pop-up to hit it back, but if you play with somebody who's better than you, when you hit it to them, they'll hit it back low across the net. And literally all you need to do is stick out your tennis racket or your iPhone, and it'll like go right back over the net low. So find somebody who's better than you. Don Miller is better than me at actually everything. And what I would do is I would write a chapter, I would send it to him, and he would say one of two things. If he liked the chapter, he'd say finale. I don't even know why. One word, finale. And if it totally sucked, if it was horrible, he'd say, Maria's going to love this. Here, check it out. Let's go to Temecula. Hello, it's Bob here. Yes, it's Bob. Hey, listen, I've got to, I'm just talking to a friend right now, so call me in an hour and we can talk. Okay, see ya. What I did with Don, I kept sending chapters to him, and he kept giving me beautiful input. And sometimes the input was saying, Maria's going to love this. In other words, it ain't going in the book. So find somebody that'll hit it low across the net back to you. And I think there's something to, and be constantly interrupted while you're doing it. Don't be like, oh man, I was in the middle of writing something. Like, no way, man, life goes on. This is part of it. As a matter of fact, your writing will be better if you're interrupted, but it's got to be interrupted by love. It's got to be interrupted for somebody that's totally selfless. There's nothing in it. If it's interrupted by a ham sandwich and a chocolate bar and a Pop-Tart, that's just like wasting time. But if you interrupt it by acts of love and like, oh, your writing will just right through the roof and you'll find your voice. So you won't try to say like what'll be popular. You'll say what'll be meaningful, what'll actually last. And I don't try to be smarter than I am or deeper. And I'm not trying to win arguments anymore. We're not writing trial briefs. We're writing these beautiful love letters to people. And everybody will have their thing, but I don't know if it's like people in whatever it is that lights you up, go do that. But for me, at least, I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to be humble. So what would be the humblest version of that? Not like artificial, but like actually humble. I live on the bay with Sweet Maria Goff. And apparently a lot of people know where we live now. And they come by our house on boats. And they talk about me. And Chandler, it's so awkward because I can hear them. And because their voices carry over the water. And one of the things that I've learned in writing is that humble voices carry further. So find the humblest version of you. Just that one. Find somebody who's better than you to tell you that that one's like finale, or your wife's going to love that. So when I had 30 finales, I sent it to the publisher. And then they circled to the chapters and they said, I don't get it on the top. I'm like, your mama doesn't get it. I got a finale from Dawn over this. I mean, like, but I was humble. And so I said, fine. So I just pulled those chapters out and I wrote 2 other ones. And actually way more than 2, because it took me a while to get a couple more finales. So that idea of in your writing, I'm not trying to win arguments. I'm not trying to earn friends. I'm just trying to kind of get it down and say what's not just what sounds right, but what's actually true. And that's the process I go through, because faith is a big deal for me. It isn't for everybody, but I'll write down throughout the day. I'll send myself 60 emails and I'll say, email me myself things I think that are true. I won't write down what you said because I'll forget you said it and I'll think I thought it later, but things that I think are true, I'll write it down. And then I'll sit down in the morning and I'll say, now, are these things that I thought sounded right actually true? And if they're true, they find their way into books. And if they just sound right, they just end up on this shelf. And I have one document that has 1.4 million words in it. And it's just a shopping. It's like a grocery store. And what I'll do is a word search on something. I'll go into my grocery store and I'll just do a word search and be like, there's everything I think about that. It's really been fun. So if I get stuck, I go like, what do I think about? I don't know, whatever. There's not much about bananas in there. Although one time I was very curious about why they were yellow. And there's not much about bees in there. However, I found out a bee is positively charged and a flower is negatively charged. That's why the pollen sticks. People who are great writers are curious about everything. They want to know why a pope is picked and a Dalai Lama is found. They want to know how Dippin' Dots were invented and who's the voice of Siri. And so I called the Dippin' Dots guy. I called the Siri gal up in Sacramento. I met the Dalai Lama just because I wrote, because he said he wasn't going to reincarnate himself. I thought, well, then we should meet now. So what if you're just infinitely curious about everything, and that'll come out in your writing, but those aren't all your stories. It's just that you're a very curious, engaged person.
Now, what do you have any particular process that you follow for writing? So you go to the grocery store, then are you writing in the morning, or are you writing an hour a day, or like, how did you get the whole book finished, and what's kind of, how has your writing process evolved over time?
One of the things that might differ from some of the folks who are listening is that I am speaking to a lot of people. And so what I'll find myself, like I was in Nashville yesterday, talking to some folks. So what I did is I took notes on what I talk about. A lot of times people will like write their talk and then give a speech, but nobody wants a speech. Wouldn't it be dumb if I came over to your house at Thanksgiving and I had a speech? You'd be like, dude, just pass the potatoes, right? So what I'll find myself doing is every conversation that you and all of your listeners have, just take notes and to say, now, what does that mean to me? I want to remember those things. And then when you're writing, just write into the things that are true, the things that actually shimmer a little bit to you. Go like, I can actually write in. Don't try to write a whole book about it. Just a sentence, maybe two.
What were the toughest parts or the biggest struggles that you went through in writing Love Does?
Spelling. I literally spelled of, U-V. I'm like, of. Like, it didn't look right, but I'm like, of. So for a guy that writes a lot of trial briefs, and most of these things like spell check doesn't even have a suggestion. So for me, the easy part is the stories to think about. Oh, and I've written down in my grocery store, I have every story I know. And it doesn't start out the sun rose on eagle's wings and all that. It's just be shooting the rubber band and hitting a priceless painting. So like all I had to do is like those 5 words, I remember that story. So there are 900 stories I know because I was flipping through them. There are 900 stories that I know of, not because I'm trying to tell 900 stories, but I just said, is that a story? That actually is kind of a story. They're not all stories for everybody, but they're stories for me. So what if your listeners just wrote down just all the things you remember? Don't write a paragraph. Write a chapter if you want, but just write a word or two so you remember that story. Because if you don't write it down, it's like this dog that goes running across the field and you whistle and he never comes back. Right? You go like, oh, I remember the thing, or don't have a conversation with Chandler Bolt and not take a couple notes. That'd be stupid because we've spent some time together. You ought to walk away with something from it.
I love that. Now, you talked about having kind of a crazy travel schedule now and speaking all the time and all that. How do you balance that? And how do you find time to write still today?
Airplanes. It's awesome. There's these things called headphones. And there's this awesome stuff called rock and roll. So what I do is I'll get on the airplane, and for me, for somebody else, it'll be a commute or a whatever, but I'm on an airplane almost 7 days a week. Sweet Maria Goff drops me off at the airport at 5:15 every morning, and I go somewhere to talk to somebody. And most of the time, she doesn't even know what city I was in. I was in 220 cities in 10 countries this year. So most of the time, she doesn't even know. When people ask her, where's Bob? She always says he's on his way home, because I always am. So I'll fly home for supper. It might be a late supper, but I get home. And the next day, she'll drop me off at the airport. Each day, I put my headphones on, I open up my laptop, and instead of looking at CNN, I write words. And I don't try to like, I'm not vetting the words as I'm writing. I'm just saying like, talking about things that matter, things that sound right. And then here's the next sieve. Is it really true? You want to hear a bunch of stuff that sounds right? Listen to Tony Robbins. He's awesome. It all sounds right. Some of it's actually even true. But I'm not trying to be opinionated. I just go like, I want things that are true last. I know loving people well always lasts. There's some more stuff that'll last, right? So, but just figure out that stuff. And if your writing is towards things that last, that'll actually matter to your great grandkids. Who cares if anybody buys a book? It'd be terrific if they did. But I promise you, if you write about stuff that lasts, it's going to be, if you give people a bunch of facts, whatever, they agree, they disagree, which is fine. I'm a lawyer. For 30 years, I gave people facts and I proved every fact, but I'm not trying to prove stuff anymore. Wouldn't it be dumb, Chandler, if I said, hi, I'm Bob, and I gave you my driver's license? And then I said, I live in San Diego, and I gave a utility bill to prove it. And then I said, I'm married to Sweet Maria Goff, and I show you our marriage certificate. That would be pretty lame, wouldn't it? Don't try to prove everything you say. It would just, you come across stupid. It's unnecessary. And so sometimes one of the things that I have to go through in my writing is say, is it necessary to say that? That's that idea of like less. What's the shortest way? Think of like speed dating. What's the shortest way you could date that idea and decide if you want to go hang out? And I don't know how it works, but I think you get like a minute with each person, and then they like press a button, you go to the next person to see it. Is there some connection here? Because if there isn't a connection between you and that idea, move on. And just like in your writing, end mid-sentence, end in the middle of the word. Just say like, just not digging it anymore. And when I get stuck, I go shopping. I go into my grocery store of ideas. I just pull an idea or two off the shelf, put it in my basket, push it around the store. If you want Twizzlers, they're down there. You want zucchini, it's down there. Like, I don't know, what are you digging today? Usually Twizzlers. So literally, I want something fun. I'm talking about something fun. My house burned down a week and a day ago. I know a place I spent 20 years building. I'm not going to camp out in the middle of being bummed out about that. Am I sad? Oh, heck yeah. It was a pretty big place. But I don't think I'm going to write about that right now. And it's not because it's too painful. It's just there's so many other things that I think will last more because pain is pain, whether you lose a friend or a bike or a house or a relationship. So I just go like, I'm just not feeling it right now. So some people will be very cathartic to write about current events. That's not for me. So know what's good for you. I'm going for the Twizzler aisle right now because I've got enough bummer news. I want something happy to write about. We'll get to the other one. It'll pop up.
What's been the most rewarding part for you of just seeing the massive success of this book?
Oh, I don't know if it's massive success, but I've enjoyed when people will call up or send a note and say that it mattered. You know, I think you, everybody else, just enjoy that. That would be the feedback from your shows. Just say like, man, I was really glad you did that. Thanks a lot. You could be doing anything. You could run a small country and you just get this little, it's like a little cup of water for somebody who's thirsty, right? So when somebody says that it made a little difference, I'm sure everybody that's listening can identify when somebody's done that for you. There was a guy who is a musician. His name is Keith Green. In 1979, before there was even the internet, Keith Green, I found out his address. I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me a letter back that had 3 sentences. I don't even know what they said, but I was so impressed that he wrote 3 sentences to me. I get 400 emails a day. Everybody gets 3 sentences. So you want to know what I'm doing on the airplane? Writing stories and answering emails, because there's something so validating about like getting. instead of saying subscribe to my whatever, forget it. Just write back to them. Say, man, that's a beautiful idea. What's your next step? I can't be pen pals, but I got 3 sentences in me. You got 3 in you? That'll last. Like it just will.
That's awesome. What do you think? Because I mean, it goes from this thing of like, hey, let's build a school, to next thing you know, like 1,000,000 copies sold, which is no small feat. Like, what do you think led to the success of the book? Was there anything you guys did marketing wise? How did it catch on so well?
I don't think there was any marketing. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know, but literally it just showed up on Amazon on a Tuesday or something. And I didn't know any better. I'm like, oh, there it is. They sent me a couple copies in the mail. I'm like, I smell them. I'm like, wow, there it is. Check it out. But there was no like pre-release, launch party, all that stuff. So the next book, like I'm doing the same thing. I'm just show up on a Tuesday. Won't that be fun? I'm like, if I get my way, that's what it'll just be out there. And wouldn't that be kind of fun? Just be like, if I hear like Chandler's like written something or he's got this thing going, the word of mouth thing is almost kind of fun. And you aren't doing it to be edgy. It's just like, I don't know, more accessible. So we do things called living room events. And we did one in our living room a couple months ago. I just put out on Twitter. I got room for about 30 people in my living room. So next Wednesday, 10 a.m., first 30 people that signed up, like we'll meet. So 800 people signed up in 4 minutes. And so I'm like, dude, I wish I had a bigger enough house, but I don't. So what we did is that living room, but then I rented the House of Blues at Disneyland last week. And so all these people showed up and I bought them all tickets to Disneyland. And we met in Disneyland. So if you want to talk about your future, I had somebody over in Tomorrowland. If you want to talk about your biggest fear, I'm like, somebody at the Haunted Mansion. I had propaganda was in the castle, and the guy that made Kid President was in Toontown, and I was on Main Street. And so we just like gathered, and there's something beautiful about that. Here's the deal. You use your imagination, you get your words out there, and it's not doing it because you're trying to when people like Rolodex cards. You're just trying to like make yourself available, and then nutty things will happen. When I let Love Does release, I had 200 Twitter followers. Isn't that crazy? So when you say, well, you need a bigger whatever, you don't. You just need a couple friends, like people that like you and talk about you and want to talk behind your back about the right things.
Do you think that was a big part of the book, is the word of mouth from people just reading it and sharing it with a friend saying, you got to read this?
Yeah, maybe. I think there are a lot of folks that, because faith is one of the threads that goes through this, I think perhaps some of the appeal was to people that had felt a little turned off by organizations and people telling them what to believe and all that, and they felt like maybe it was just a different camera angle. I don't think it's better or worse. It's just a different voice. And sometimes that voice ends up harmonizing with other things in their lives. And but I think for at least books where faith is the topic, a lot of times they give them a lot of Bible verses. And I'm like, oh, heck no. Because then we'll just have a bunch of people arguing about what things mean, or they'll have some compelling picture. I'm like, I've never met anybody who didn't like a balloon. so again, it's literally, what would Mater do from Cars? And Mater would you could have a big Bible verse that says, my beloved is mine and I am his. And you could have a big Bible study. Or you could say, like, what would Mater say? He'd say, it's kind of like you're his and he's yours. So just think of the simplest way to say whatever it is that you have to say, people. If it's a technical book you're writing, it's going to be hard to say it's simple, but most of your listeners aren't writing that one. So just have them and use their voice. Don't try to be somebody else, because we want to be us. There's this thing, it's called crossfire in the Olympics. And these marksmen, when they shoot by mistake at somebody else's target, like as all the targets are in a row, easy to miss your target and hit somebody else's. So don't do cross. Don't aim for your target Chandler. Don't aim for money. Your listeners, be true to your voice. Don't try to be like whoever your favorite author is. Don't be them. Just go be you. And do that confidently, because you're writing for your grandkids and your great grandkids. And they actually want to know who you are. They don't want you channeling whoever that is that you look up to. But we'll be the combination of everybody we've interacted with, right? It's like we're all either a reflection of or reaction to the people that have been closest to us. So love does. If you grew up in a place where there wasn't a lot of love, then you might be like either a reflection of that or a reaction to it. Go be that. But don't get all angsty with your people that are reading your stuff. Oh, and fail in chapter 4, right? Chapter 1's too early, and chapter 30's too late. But screw up. And a guy that was way smarter than me told me that. Find people who are brilliant writers. Don Miller, I think, is one of the best authors ever. And he's a humble guy. And so find people that inspire you like him, and then just surround yourself with these people and their ideas. But then, having surrounded yourself, go be you.
That's great. I love that advice. How have you seen your book impact the work that you're able to do with your charity and with your organization?
Well, what we've done now is put it into quite a few languages. And so one of the things that's kind of neat, the most recent language it got released in is in Braille. And nobody would do it, so I just paid for it myself. It cost me more than a car. But you know what? I know one guy who's blind, and I'm going to give it to him tomorrow. It's going to blow his mind. So what if you just get like, you just start thinking like, what a caper this could be. It's in prisons everywhere. We just mail them out by the case. It's terrific. We call it books for crooks just in the office here. But that idea of just give books away to people who've known failure, but don't say you're not a failure. You're not who you were, you're who you're becoming. And then go visit prisons. Why do I do that? Matthew 25, hungry people, thirsty people, sick people, strange people, naked people, and people in jail. Those are the only things when we meet God, like that's all he wants to talk about. So that's what I try to do. I give hamburgers to hungry people. I give water bottles to thirsty people. We've got a nude beach up in La Jolla. I just stand at the top of the cliff and just throw socks over. But so I'm just trying to, instead of agreeing with all of it, I'm just trying to do some of it. And so it's prisoners. I'm like, I could give some books to some prisoners. So that's what we do. And then we meet these amazing men and women that have made a couple mistakes, but they're not their mistakes. I'm not my mistakes. So, but you see them for who they're becoming. And the crazy part is these authors that are listening, you'll start seeing who you're becoming, and you'll start writing like that person. And you know what I'm not becoming? Don Miller. I'm becoming Bob. I'm not becoming Oprah. I'm becoming Bob. So what's the next humblest version of me? And so these books have been helpful for me. And I'm actually just finishing up the next one right now. I had a bit of a setback. I'd written over 60,000 words, and it was on my laptop. And I went to visit a buddy of mine up in San Francisco who works with some really tough people in San Francisco. Here, let's go to Nashville. Hello, it's Bob here. Hi.
It's a new reset.
The number is true. It really works. Hey, listen, I'm just talking to a couple of friends right now, but can I give you a call back in like an hour? Yes. Okay, I'll do that. Bye, you guys. So what you do is you be constantly interrupted, but then you pick up your writing. You pick up your conversations. You pick it up. And it didn't distract. It wasn't a departure from your writing, because all the people that are listening are trying to write and they're getting constantly interrupted. Me too, on purpose. Because I think my writing will be better if it's about love and sacrifice. And it's going to cost you 1 minute to say, I know the number's really true. And they're like, that's all I wanted to know. And then get back to your writing. And then, but don't try to be somebody else. Say like, what actually will matter? So I got 60,000 words of this next book written, went to visit my friend that while I'm inside with all of his felon buddies, like they broke all the windows of this van that I'd rented. And they took my luggage, my wallet, my iPhone. They took my laptop. I'm talking to you off a brand new laptop. And the book was on the laptop and it wasn't backed up.
Oh, no.
Isn't that awesome? 60,000 words. But you know what? Everybody's second book always sucks. So I'm writing it again. I'm like, this is my third book. So
That's
don't get
amazing.
distracted. Some stuff's going to deal with distraction by getting distracted a lot. And you can get right back to your conversations. Lose your book, get right back to it. Lose your thought, get right back to it. Just get back to it. Stop mourning and writing about how hard it is to write a book. Don't worry about it. What's next? You're just living in a constant state of anticipation. And it isn't this jumped up, jacked up like Red Bull high. It's instead, you're like thinking like you're just so anxious to get on with it that you're just forgetting the stuff that lies behind and forging ahead to what's in front. I'm not even going to take this, but like this is like literally hey, call me back in about 20 minutes. So literally be constantly interrupted all day, all night, and your writing will rock because all the ideas that weren't good ones, they're going to disappear amongst all of this. But the things that actually matter, the things that are true, the things that will last, you'll actually remember and you'll get those down. So this is a beautiful sieve because every silly idea that didn't matter, I got no space to remember those. But the few that actually might land in my life, might land in somebody's life, like those will actually survive the onslaught of interruptions.
Now, what's the new book about?
You know, it's going to be a bunch of more stories. It'll just be a bunch of stories about people who have screwed up. Like that's it. It's just somebody who just didn't work out right. It's actually kind of a requirement to be my friend. You have to mess up or we won't have anything in common. So I teach actually a class at Pepperdine Law School and at Point Loma Nazarene on failure. That's it. Every single week. I never tell anybody who's coming, but every single week I teach this class and I bring one of my friends that failed in front of everybody. Like if they haven't failed in front of about 100 million people on YouTube, they don't make the cut. Isn't that awesome? So
wow.
Every week I'm like, ha ha, this person, and it's like Vegas. I would say like nothing leaves the room. But like, let's talk because I don't want people, especially these lawyers, to think they're winners because they lost or won or they're losers because they lost. I just want them to think that they're people because they tried.
That's great, Bob. Love your happiness, love your joy, and love just everything you've shared so far on this interview. I kind of have one final question for you, and that's what will be your parting tip or piece of advice for someone thinking about writing their first book?
Yeah, no advice. An observation. Like I have people that give me advice and I usually divide it by the biggest number I can think of. And I can think of some pretty big numbers. But observations. You're going to have room around your deathbed for 8 people, 9 if they're thin, probably 8 people. So I've figured out who are the 8 people I want around my bed on my last day here on earth. And what I'm trying to do is surround my life with them right now. And these 8 people to a person don't give me advice. What they do is they tell me about who they see me becoming. So be picky about who your 8 are. And the crazy part is your 8 will change all the time. They will. You don't have to send them a text message and say, you're off the island. But find out who your 8 are, or your 6, or your 3. Not people who are blowing sunshine at you, but people who tell you who you are. Mm-hmm. Like, I see you, all right? And you think of the people that come to mind. You might even, when we're all done, like send them a text message. Say, you're one of the 8. And they'll say, what does that mean? You're like, don't worry about it. Well, what if you know who your 8 are, and then just find ways to get in the blast radius of their love? Like, just, you don't have to have some big meeting. I don't even know what mentoring is. I think it's just means getting some of the 8 around you and having them tell you who you are. And your writing will improve. Your relationships will improve. Your life will improve. You'll figure out more of who you're becoming and then write into that.
Awesome. Fantastic, Bob. This has been great. Where can people go to find out more about you and the stuff that you're up to?
Oh, I'm just around. I'm like an easy guy to find.
Just find your phone number, huh?
I'm just around. Yeah. If you just Google Bob Goff, something will pop up. But I just like, what if you and I are just the most available guys? And that's why you're doing what you do. You could be running a small country, but you said, I want to do these kinds of things on the internet so people could grow and learn and all that. So there's something beautiful and lasting about that. So again, I'm not blowing sunshine at you, but that would be an example of find people who say, I know who you are. I don't know everything about you. I don't need to. I know that piece, that you're giving away love freely and sacrificially. And there's just nothing on the other side of the equal sign.
Love it, man. Bob, thank you so much. You're awesome.
Thanks for letting me hang out. I'll see ya.